afternoon, Brian. How you doing?
Nick, I don't even know what to say about what to expect with today's episode. We took some things in a decidedly different direction, I guess I would say. I got a chance to reference one of my favorite authors who I don't think I've ever shared either with you or on this
Yeah,
program.
nope.
His name's Robert Anton Wilson, and he's been gone for a number of years now, but he wrote a lot of books. And one of my favorite books of his is actually only available on audio, and it's called Robert Anton Wilson Explains Everything, or Old Bob Exposes His Ignorance. And in it, he was asked to explain, if you were to summarize, what are all your life's learnings about, and you could put that into a phrase, what would it be? And he said, amor et hilaritas, which is love and laughter. And I gotta say, Nick, I feel like that's what we brought today. There's a lot of laughter.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Peter Margaritis is definitely a different person than we've had in our past. But his background is accounting. He was a CPA, and his whole thing, yes and taking the numb out of numbers. His book. We thought he'd be a good guest to bring on because accountants and CPAs are the first. Silo of business where they were talking to their leadership and nobody understood anything they said to them. And now we have technology. We speak just like them. We talk to people and they have no idea what we're talking about.
That's right. And I love how it connects empathy as a leadership quality to his background in improv. And in fact, he's written another book called Improv is No Joke, Using Improvisation to Create Positive Results in Leadership and Life. And we get a great opportunity to talk with him about that to a degree. I also think about the years that I've spent as a DJ, which, may surprise some of our listeners, but part of that empathy, comes from reading an audience, right? And when you read the crowd as a DJ, if you've got an empty dance floor, you're in trouble. You'd better change some things up and figure out how to navigate through it pretty quickly. And he addresses some of those same types of issues as leaders, what they're confronted with, how to navigate through some of the gray area, and really have a level of empathy so that you can have engagement that's authentic and is really working in harmony with those who you're trying to serve.
And I loved, he said, everyone should take one improv class. So I guess that's my homework, right? I need to find an improv class and do one. Have you ever done that before, Brian?
It's been many years since I've done it, but okay. I have done it before. And I have a friend who actually just recently went through improv and then was, as part of graduating from the class, had to go through an improv routine at Denver Comedy Works. So, I think it's something that both of us should put on our to-do list, because I'm convinced now there's new opportunities and insights that await us.
Well, what I like about Peter's, when you bring up the comedy, and some of it's like he said, you bring up your own situations, right? So you're bringing up vulnerability. As a leader, when you're doing these presentations, you're allowing people to make a connection with you because you're being vulnerable while you're presenting. But I don't want to take any more of Peter's thunder. We've got a great episode for our guests, so let's get on with it.
Love it. Welcome to another edition of Lead.exe. I'm Brian Comerford in Denver, Colorado.
And I'm Nick Lozano in Washington, D.C.
And today we've got a very special guest, Peter Margaritis. He is a certified speaking professional and author who also tends to refer to himself as the accidental accountant. You're going to be learning more about that on this episode, only if we can actually keep the reins intact to guide the conversation forward. We've already been having a lot of fun with Peter before we even got started here. So, Peter, welcome to the program. And if you could kick us off and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate the opportunity. Yes, I am the accidental accountant. I am a CPA, but not a really good one. And I'm quite honest with that. You see, I didn't get into this profession until I was 30 years old. My last name is Margaritas. I'm Greek. I should be in the restaurant. Really? I should be in the kitchen cooking. And actually, that's what I did for a large part of my life from 12 years old all the way through college and managed a couple pizza places after that. But then I found myself in the accounting profession. And I come in with this, as someone said, you're very gregarious. I went to University of Kentucky. I have to look that up. And now that I understand what it means, and I come into a profession that I walked in the door of Price Waterhouse on day one, and all the air left. That wasn't what it was like when I went through my interviews. There was a lot of action, a lot of air in there, but it was all gone, and they couldn't figure me out, and I surely couldn't figure them out. And I survived 4 years at Price Waterhouse. Oh, before that, I went to Case Western Reserve and got a master's of accountancy, which means I can study. I passed the CPA exam, which means I know how to study. And then they wanted me to do, and so I left Price Waterhouse and went to work for Victoria's Secret Catalog. Not as a model, but I appreciate it, guys. I saw the twinkle in both you guys' eyes when I said that.
If they could only see the video.
That's right.
Right. And my boss on my performance review, my cheeks hadn't hit the seat yet, and she goes, "How in the hell did you ever become a CPA? CPAs can get down into here. I can get you about halfway. You're an accidental accountant." I thanked her. That was the nicest thing she's ever said to me at that point. But I looked at her and said, "But when you want something done in this building, who do you ask to get it done?" She goes, "Well, you, Pete, because your cheeks are never in the seat." I went, No. I'm not eating bonbons and watching Oprah. See, I realized since I got into this profession late that there's this thing called a stereotype about accountants and CPAs. Have you heard about this, guys?
I know something about it. I got a lot of accountants in my family.
So understanding that stereotype, I'm in the information gathering business, and if I need information and I come in as the CPA or the accountant into your office, the likelihood that you're going to be forthwith and give that information up, it's probably not going to be, well, you can just probably not going to do it at first or find ways of saying no. But if you know me as Pete, or the guy I had a cocktail with or I had lunch with, you're more likely to give me that information. And the more that I know of you and we become friends and such, the more willing you are to give me information. And sometimes you'll give me information that you're not unaware of when we go to happy hour. So that's how I got the accidental accountant, and I've actually have a registered trademark on it. And then I found, why not? What the heck? And then I found myself unemployed for a while, and someone thought I could be a good teacher, and I started teaching at the college level at the Ohio Dominican University. That joke kills in Columbus. I mean, people just laugh hysterically.
I was expecting the Ohio State University.
Right. And I taught there for about 10 years and learned how to build curriculum and learn how to class. And as my students said, I made accounting fun, which is an oxymoron. But I have a background in humor. I'm not a very good stand-up comedian because I'm talking to you guys versus out being on the road. I've been a student of improvisation for over 20 plus years, and I was able to take that humor, that piece of my background, my business accounting background, and it turned out to be really good as a teaching tool. And I've taught hardcore accounting for about 10 years, but my real love was more from a leadership, communication, compassionate level. And today I have my own business, and the name of the business is Peter Margaritis LLC, but doing business as the accidental accountant, where I do communication programming, leadership programming, primarily for financial professionals. But I have worked with sales teams in different types of manufacturing industries. And I went full time with this business in 2010, and I have not worked a day since. Ask my wife, you'll get a whole different story.
Spoken like a true entrepreneur.
Yeah, exactly. Of course I can do that.
I love your background. You and I have some similarities there, both kind of starting out in the restaurant industry and
That's right.
accidentally finding our way. Same thing with Brian. Brian, got into technology through music. So we're here with you, kind of accidentally being in the positions that we're in. Um, Kind of brings me to the first question I want to ask you is, as technology leaders are faced with communicating with executives, we're kind of where the heck am I going with this? I'm tripping over my words here. We have to take complex information and present it to people who might not actually understand what we're saying to them. And I feel like accountants are the very first, role where you work somewhere and no one completely understood what you did, right? Or
Right.
what you said to them.
Right.
Like you turn around to somebody, you're like, oh, well, what's the depreciation on that? You doing straight line or are you doing it a different way? And most people look at you and go, well, what the heck? And from a
I'm
technology
impressed.
yeah. And from a technology perspective, we us technology leaders might turn around and go, okay, we're gonna do Amazon workspaces here, or are we gonna, go ahead and spin up EC2 instead? Yeah, so your face is exactly the same thing.
Oh,
So as somebody, who works, in a highly technical area, how do you communicate clearly and confidently to your fellow peers in the C level to make sure that they understand what you're saying?
yeah. The first thing I have to get them to understand is they speak a foreign language.
Hmm.
They speak the foreign language of business called accounting. Because, like you said, when you say depreciation to a non-accountant, they think that's the value they lose in their car when they drive it off the car lot. And the accountant's going, no, 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 that's a systematic allocation of an asset over time. So my first challenge is to get them to realize they do speak a foreign language.
Hmm.
And two, just they can't yell it out just to make you understand, like when we do and we go to foreign countries. But they have to learn how to translate it into the thing called plain English. And it's really hard to do that. And I discovered that I think when I first discovered that accounting was a foreign language, my wife and I were dating at the time, and we would meet for dinner. She goes, "Tell me about your day," and then she'd glaze over like a deer. And she goes, "Would you speak English to me?" I said, "I'm speaking English." She goes, "No, you're speaking Chinese to me. Tell me what you did." And this went on for a while until I realized, wait a minute, she doesn't have that knowledge that I have. Just like your folks, they don't have. You've got extensive knowledge in your profession, in your industry, and those who don't, we have no clue because we haven't invested that time as you guys have, and as we as accountants. So once we realize that, and we realize we're speaking to someone who is not of our complex, our competency in that subject matter, we have to put it in plain English and put it in using story, using analogies. And that's how we do it. And from accounting, and you can help me here as it relates to technology, but in accounting, numbers don't move themselves.
Hmm.
A five's not sitting there today going, "I'm a 5. Tomorrow I'm going to be a 10. Nah, that might be too much. The next time I come back to an 8. People move the numbers. Some type of some type of transaction has to occur, which has been started or engaged or created by a human. So when we see numbers that are out of line to our expectations, we have to go. If there's any CPAs listening, you get out behind your desk and go find out why that number moved. Don't just say it went up by 20%. Why? What made it move? The only technical thing I still teach is financial analysis because I love finding the story behind the numbers and communicating that story. So just like with you guys, with the technology happens, but it doesn't happen on its own yet, right?
No, you still need a human in there
You
to
still
at least implement it. There's still that human element, even if it's artificial intelligence. A human still needs to implement it.
exactly. So when things occur that are unexpected, we have to find out what that is and realize that you'll be speaking in your highly complex technology language. But how do I take that and translate it into something as in plain English? As in, like, just everyday kind of analogies that people can understand. And that does take time. That does take a fair amount of work.
Oh yeah, there's no question about it. And I like the idea that you're touching on our own secret languages, because part of, as technology leaders, part of the challenge for us is we end up interacting with a lot of folks who come from more purely business informed domains. They may not realize that they've got their own secret language and set of symbols and all these things that make it very easy for them to communicate with their business associates in that way. And then it sort of forces the hand of us as technologists to come be multilingual and be able to interact in that same way, so that we can all be equally understood. But Nick, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I tend to find that business doesn't have that same expectation of itself, that it should actually be learning more about what can technology do and what's the language kind of behind the scenes, so that it can better articulate what its needs are. And so that also leaves us having to have good bedside manner and part-time playing psychologists, so that we can really elicit those details right through the process.
Is he wrong, Nick?
No, he's right, and I'm sure you've probably experienced that too, just in the CPA days, right? As an accountant, you talk to other people and they just have no idea what you're completely talking about.
Right. And you guys are perfect. I mean, so I've attended enough conferences in my day, and I don't know. I still don't know when this occurred. When did we? Because we grew up with story.
Mhm.
We grew up telling stories. When did it turn into every time we're communicating in a conference or communicating with others across organizations that we're doing a dissertation?
Yeah.
We're like defending a dissertation. It's all facts and figures. It's a data dump. And
Mhm.
all that does is put people to sleep. Or as I like to say at a conference, it creates the conference prayer, because they take this out, they take their cell phones out, they bow their heads, and they're not looking at you. They're playing Angry Birds or reading email or something.
That's always a good key to engagement, even in a meeting, right? When
Right.
you're hosting a meeting or anything, and as soon as you see people look down at their phones, or now you got those Apple watches and everything, so people looking at their watch, you don't know if they're actually looking at the time. That's a good way to tell that your audience or the people in your meeting aren't engaged. So you brought up storytelling, and that's a great point. Something that Brian and I are pretty passionate about. Um, so what are your tips for people that you get them when you get them into storytelling? I know right there you just talked about the prayer, but um, what's your methodology or thought behind storytelling?
Well, it really first starts with the audience.
Hmm.
Okay, so a lot of times we don't put ourselves in the audience's shoes. We put in our shoes. So the first thing I try to do is put myself in the audience member's shoes and scope out their level of competence. How, if I'm in a room with a bunch of CPAs and CFOs and stuff, I can say the crazy acronyms. I can use the high tech language. But if I'm in a room with younger CPAs who don't have the complexity that I have, or those who are not, I've got to figure them out and figure out how I can tell the story.
Hmm.
And there's an example that I use is it was a night before I was doing a presentation back in 2013 or 14. And one of the topics, I was doing hardcore accounting. One of the topics was consolidations of variable interest entities. And this all came about because of Enron. And I'm looking at my stuff going, oh, dear Lord, I'm going to put myself to sleep when I cover this. Because it was a data dump.
Hmm.
And I sat there that night and I said, so what are they trying to do? And they're trying to take an entity over here that's on the off balance sheet and put it on the balance sheet. They're trying to take something over here and shove it in here, but over here doesn't want it. They're trying to take something over here and they're trying to move it. Oh, move it. Oh, move it in over here. So the idea came up. And as soon as I put the slide up, said consolidations of VIEs, I had like 200 CPAs in the office and they all grabbed their phone. I mean, it was almost instantaneously. And I said, this is about my third year. So I'm going to do a little audience poll. I said, for those who are in the room, could you raise your hand if you're married? And they're looking at me strange. And I said, no, seriously, raise your hand. And I said, raise your hand if you have a mother-in-law. And all these hands are up there. I said, I want you to think of your mother-in-law as a variable interest entity. And your spouse wants their mother to move into your household. And then equated it to a variable interest entity. And it went from people looking at their phones to leaning in and laughing and engaging. And if I go back to Arizona and speak for the Arizona Society of CPAs, and if somebody was in that audience that day, they'll go, "You're the mother-in-law guy." And to me, that's one of the greatest compliments I could get, because I have a really cool last name. But if they remember the mother-in-law guy before that, I've succeeded.
So, part of how I imagine you have learned how to assess reading the crowd is through some of your interest in improv. And in fact, you've written an entire book around how these techniques can be applied into a leadership set. Yes, man, there we go. So talk to us a little bit about that. What is, how did you start to apply these characteristics of improv, both to your approach as a public speaker, but also how did you start to correlate this to a series of techniques that could be beneficial for leadership?
You mentioned something earlier about, frustration. We get frustrated, and improv, it's about, obviously about two words, yes and. It's all about agreement, but not always agreeing. It's about empathy. It's about putting yourself in the other person's shoes.
Yeah.
It's about listening to understand versus listening to respond, because we live in a listen to respond culture, because we've got an agenda in our head. We try to push that agenda. We interrupt people. We're not listening, and there's no respect. And when you have no respect between two parties, you know what you call that? Congress. Because
I was waiting for that.
Yeah, nothing's getting done. So in improv, it's all about deferring your judgment. It's all about, when you walk into a room, you leave your ego behind. You just park it. It's all about listening to the conversation, and truly listening, because we're listening to understand. We're parking our agenda and trying to assess what the person's saying, and then not saying no, or that's a stupid question, or that's a stupid idea. It's like, oh, interesting idea. Tell me more. Have you thought about this? Well, yes. And have you thought about that? And it's more about engaging a conversation than shutting it down. And people think improv is all about making stuff up, because that guy Drew Carey, where everything's made up and the points don't count. Yeah, whose line is it? Well, Drew knows.
Anyways, yeah.
Drew knows that's incorrect, because I realized my second workshop improv. Somebody said, you might like this, and I thought we were going to write comedy. It was something different, but the instructor said, come back next week. We'll go out and study the 70s. Soak in all the information you can from the 70s. And if you grew up in the 70s, you might want to research it, because you probably don't remember it. So that was a good joke for those who grew up in the 70s. I learned so many things. And those of us who came to the workshop that next week and did the homework, we were funny. Those who didn't weren't. And I went, this isn't about being funny. This is about our knowledge, our experiences, what we have to bring into a situation. That's improv. And that's when my big aha went. So I try to be I'm a professional speaker, but I try to be a better listener. I try to listen to my audience by the body language, to see if they're getting the information, if they're receiving it, if they're with me, or there's always a few. But if I start seeing certain body language amongst most in the room, I've got to change it up, and just accepting what's given to me and moving forward with it, and moving that conversation forward. That's improv. So many times in business today, we were not even close to doing any of that with our customers, with our people. So you guys are in offices, and I would ask my audience, so what business are you guys in? And you would answer, apparently they fell asleep on the other end, or not sure what business the hell.
Our businesses would be different, but most people would say, I guess for me, an insurance business, or we're in, the restaurant business, or we're in, I don't know, the music business. But I would say you're in the people business, right?
Bingo, you're in the people business.
Yep.
I know in my world, it transcends all. We don't think about that. We're in the people business first and foremost. Everything else is a byproduct. And improv is a leadership tool because it empowers, it inspires, it motivates. It doesn't want to tear down. It doesn't want to destroy. It wants to continue to grow, because as a leader, this is not about me. This is about my team. It's the opposite of ego leadership. And it's a way of life. I've turned it into a way of life.
Clearly.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, I love that. And in fact, the title of your podcast is Change Your Mindset, right?
Right.
That's not something that either an improv artist or an accountant, a title that for me would leap to mind for either of those two types.
Right. And actually, I rebranded it about a year and a half ago, because I've been doing mine for about 3.5 years. My original podcast was Improv Is No Joke. And it's hard to get accountants, financial professionals, to tune into something that scares them to death. So I went through a process of rebranding it, but it really is a change in mindset. And I think a lot of us in corporate America and in business today have a hard time changing that mindset. This is when I hear this, I just want to just shoot somebody. No, let's take that back. but this is the way we've always done it. This is how we do things around here. Then I just go, then you're not going to survive. Mm-hmm. You're going to be BlackBerry. You have to continually move forward and invent. And another thing that improv does, it creativity. And you say yes and tell me more. That's a stupid idea. I was doing a workshop for Fortune 500 company, and they brought their emerging leaders in from Latin America and the U.S. And they were here for a 2-week workshop, and I had the privilege to do a creativity workshop session with them with improv, and the main topic was how we're going to increase profitability on our company. And I set the stage this: whatever you say, and this is like Las Vegas. What's said in here stays in here. We might laugh, we might be afraid, but we might think certain things. But what we say in this room stays in this room, and nobody shoots down ideas. And I want crazy ideas, because if I have crazy ideas, I've got, to your guys' world, bandwidth to play with. If people keep giving me these safe ideas, I have nothing to create.
Yeah.
So it's just yes and just give me. And so they were, how do we increase profitability? I said, raise revenue, cut costs, throw that out, go deep. And I was getting all these real safe ideas. And this one gentleman from Latin America says, I tell you what we do. This is how we're going to increase profitability in our company. We are going to kill all of our competition salespeople. I froze, and I caught myself, because I almost said, that is crazy. That is stupid. We couldn't do that. I stopped myself, and I took about 2 beats. I said, let's take murder off the table. Instead of killing them, why don't we poach them? Why don't we go find the top salespeople in our competition, see if we can lure them to us, and we can stay out of jail.
That's important.
That's important. But I don't know if we would have gotten to that point if that gentleman didn't take me seriously. And so when somebody says crazy ideas, you want them.
Right.
However, in the walls of corporate America, that could get you fired, which is the craziest thing. You want those crazy ideas. You want that bandwidth so you can create. And most of the time, they don't allow you to have that flexibility or that empowerment of that. They want to keep it within the coat and tie of the organization, which is really a waste of time.
Well, to me, it's so interesting that you bring up these points in part because in the last year I had been asked a question from a senior executive leader about digital transformation. Right? Everyone wants to know what's the secret sauce to make digital transformation happen, and my response, I really took the time to articulate it in one of my LinkedIn articles as well. And the article is called Digital Readiness Mindset. And to a lot of the points that you're bringing up, for me, it wasn't just about, now what's the project plan look like? How are we going to implement? What are the tools and technologies? What's our digital business model look like? It was more about what's your readiness to change, right? And that requires not only looking within and understanding your own points of resistance, but also looking outside of that and finding, where can you really adhere some of these changes into some niches where there's the potential for success. And I love how you characterize that around crazy ideas, because if you don't have that big thinking taking place, and crazy ideas are certainly a component of that big thinking, how do you ever find out where to exploit some of those niches that look completely different from how you may be operating today?
Exactly, and which company comes to mind? Kmart, BlackBerry. The list goes on and on.
Oh, yeah.
Circuit City.
Circuit. Yeah. So, wow.
Was once the largest corporation for a while, weren't they, in the early 90s?
Yeah,
Yep.
they were.
For sure.
And we get stuck in that same old thought process and not, thinking, oh, this internet thing, it's never going to last. Right. Yeah, we need more bandwidth to be creative. And I've always said that if I had my own company, I had people, that I was responsible for their livelihood, whatever, and I come up with a huge business issue, the collective knowledge outside of my office far exceeds the collective knowledge inside of my office.
Mhm.
So it would be a Friday, I would send an email out to everybody in the organization. This is the problem I am working on. Monday morning, I want you to come in with a Post-it note and put on my whiteboard your thought, your solution to this problem. So if I got 50 people, there's 50 ideas. I just want one from them. And then I can start looking at it and go, I can start, well, I got a big clump over here. We need to do this. Or, you know what? I never thought about this one here. This could solve everything right now. Oh, who gave this to me? I'm not sure. It could have been the janitor. I don't know. But not having my ego get in the way of, oh, this wasn't my idea. Well, my idea is just the start of the conversation. A lot of people think their idea is, in improv, we say, bring a brick, don't bring the cathedral. And we've all had that boss who comes in and says, give me your ideas, and said, no, we're going to do it this way. This is the cathedral. And we just wasted everybody's time. But his ego feels good about it now.
Yeah.
Or her ego feels good about it now.
It's interesting how much customer experience or CX has been part of this mantra, and lots of different types of organizations, lots of different industries, and to the degree that now there's a whole sort of like mystical practice behind it, right? There's consultancies that are built around delivering great CX, and how do we help your organization game plan for that? I had a conversation with one of the executives from one of our CX practice teams, and I said, have you ever gone through the process yourself of trying to shop for the product we sell? I mean, I think that right there would answer a lot of questions. We actually don't need to engage any consultants for it. Just go try actually buying the thing that we sell and come back with your ideas from that experience.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. And how much money has the company now saved?
So I would add to that, and what I was going to say, Brian, is that a lot of times when we talk about these problems, and you're talking about customer experience or customer journey or personas or whatever the heck they want to call it these days, a lot of times they're like, they're like, we know what the customer wants, right? We know what the client wants. It's like, well, have you actually talked to the customer to find out that that's exactly what they want, and you're just going to sit here and assume that that's what they want? As soon as you hear that, you should instantly know that they're probably wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
But what are we going to
Exactly.
spend that budget on then?
I don't know. We can
We
we
had
can
all that
blow
money
$1 million
earmarked for that
on
initiative.
something, I'm sure.
Oh, now you hit a sore spot. So it's December, and this is kind of a unique year. I haven't had the phone call yet, but in previous years in December, I get a phone call. Hey, can you come out and do a presentation for us on whatever? And I'm
Stand up budgeting.
stand up budgeting. Ooh, there you go. And basically, it comes down to, why are you doing this? Because if I don't spend my budget, I won't get the same amount next year. One of these days, I'm going to say, then don't hire me. Just save the company some money, and maybe you don't need this money for next year. Oh, by the way, you're an is this organization yours? No, you work for the organization. So why don't you help the organization and save some cash instead of just trying to spend it?
Yeah.
And back to your point about budgeting. Never mind.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
That one just, it's, we are one organization, but when it comes around, be very quiet. It's budget season.
Right.
It's budgeting season, and then everybody's out for themselves. The silos who should be working together are working against everybody. So I've never understood that. And actually, I was offered the job of manager or something of budgeting at Victoria's Secret. I turned them down immediately. I did. Yeah, it's like, okay, so what ultimately happens is the salespeople, IT people, what number do you want it to be? Just do that. It's this top-down approach that takes forever, that nobody likes, and but there's importance in it. But we go at it. The word budgeting sounds like a 4-letter word. and I mean, we're trying to make planning sounds to me. I like to plan for vacations. I like to plan for outings. Why don't we just call it planning? You say budgeting, and people just get that scowl on their face. And then I thought about when they said, well, in accounting, we don't make it attractive. We got this thing called accrual accounting. The word cruel is in the word cruel. Why? So when it comes to budgeting within an organization, we should be working together, not against each other. That's all I'm going to say about that. Where did Forrest Gump come from? I don't know. He just showed up. Mama always said.
To be honest, I was waiting for the Victoria's Secret reference to take us another direction, but it didn't happen.
No, I'll tell you those stories offline.
Victoria's got some secrets, huh?
Yeah. It's funny because I worked on the catalog side for about 4 or 5 years, and I left in the late 90s. My brother's in retail, been in retail all of his life, and he just left one organization and now works for Victoria's Secret stores. Must be something in the genes or the family or something. I don't know.
Peter, you touched on something earlier that I'd like to circle back to, really from an educational perspective, and part of what you talked about in terms of really injecting humor, fun stories, and using this as part of a device in your educational approach. I'll tell you, one of my favorite writers was Robert Anton Wilson, and he had a very similar kind of trajectory in the sense that his background was in electrical engineering. And he wanted to be a writer, and he wanted to be, presenting big ideas and be kind of a futurist. And very quickly realized that if you've got, sort of the sequential, process-oriented procedural mindset of someone whose background is electrical engineering, you're probably going to bore the heck out of the people that you're trying to educate. So he jumped career tracks and went and edited Playboy Forum for about a decade, and then got a degree in, psychology. So all of this is to say that some of his books are among the most fun books that I've ever read. They're full of big ideas, but everything is interlaced with humor. So it makes it easy to remember a lot of these concepts that he's bringing forward, because there's funny stories that get baked into that. So I know that one of your books is Taking the Numb Out of Numbers. In fact, I can see that you got a copy of it sitting right there. Tell us a little bit about how that came about, and did that correlate to some of this approach that you had in your own, the way that you found teaching with humor to be effective?
Yeah. So I went to school at this small liberal arts college, and that was Playboy Forum, I think. I think that's how all those. A friend of mine told me that's how all those stories would start. Looking at small. I just got this book came more out of frustration that. So as a CPA, I still have to get continuing education credit. And I can't do it anymore. I'm getting to the point because I have to sit and listen to somebody lecture. I hate lecturing. You're talking at me. You're not creating a conversation. And what happened is I do a lot of work for the Business Learning Institute, which is the innovation and learning subsidiary of the Maryland Association of CPAs. And one of their prospects about 4 years ago asked if they had a class on financial storytelling. And they said no, but we have somebody who could create it. Me. So I wrote a description. And so the client, the prospect never engaged us, but I took it and created a course. And what it is to help. And I'm going to say CPAs, but this really goes to almost any industry, but it really resonates with those industries like yours, like engineering, architecture, those left hemisphere brain types of that linear systematic process to be able to explain complex information in the way that people can understand. An accountant has to, we have clients, whether we're internal or external. If I'm a CFO, I have a client. That's the rest of the organization. If I'm in public accounting, I have clients. And our job is to inform, not to bore. And when we speak that language, we bore. So one, getting to understand this is a foreign language. Two, getting them to realize it's not about me, it's about them. I don't have time to do, no, that's about you. It's about them. And I tell audiences, have you ever sat through an 8-hour course, bored completely out of your mind? And hopefully it's not this one right now. And they all go, yeah. I said, tell me how you felt. Bored, I'm getting my hours. I kept hearing, I'm getting my hours, but I'm bored. I'm not engaged. I said, so when you do a presentation, remember how they felt. Remember how you felt, and do the opposite. Put your butt in their cheeks, in their seat, and know that pain, and find a way to cure their pain. And then I started researching storytelling techniques and stuff. And in the book, I created my own, and it's for the acronym IMPROV. And it's there's stories everywhere. I keep my Evernote. I keep a log in different stories, just enough to remember a story happens when the villain gets introduced, right? When the villain comes in. I was explaining this to this one class. It's like, so you meet someone, you meet a girl, you meet a guy, whatever, and that very first kiss. You can't, and if you have that connection, you cannot go back from that. It's like that. Or in The Hangover, you saw the movie The Hangover. The villain is introduced on the roof of Caesar's Palace when they're all up there doing shots of Jägermeister. The villain was the roofie, right?
Yep.
So everything in that story that led up to it was developing that character, because all stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I even charge for that. People pay. So you spend about 20% of the time casting the character. So we got Zach Galifianakis's idiosyncrasies as that character. I can never remember his name. than Bradley Cooper in the movie. And so then that happens. And if you watch it, then they wake up and their hotel room is trashed. Galifianakis goes into the restroom and there's a Bengal tiger in the bathroom. One guy's lost a tooth. And there's these series of what we call it. I call it the R being the raise, being the embellishing a bit to help with the story, creating more tension to keep the audience's attention.
Mhm.
Now, in our world, from those in the left hemisphere, what do you mean embellish? That's called lying. No. Don't let. We're not giving a dissertation. We're not doing a think about it this way. Don't let the facts get in the way of a good story because the facts are boring. We can add a little spice. It's like, you remember Silly Putty? Nick, do you even know Silly Putty? You don't look like you're old enough.
Oh, I know what it is. Yep. Put it on the newspaper, pull up the ink off of it. Yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And after you pull it off, what would you do with it?
Oh, you just crumple it back up. Yeah.
You crumple it back up. What did you do, Nick, with it? I mean, Brian, what'd you do?
Yeah, you got to stretch it out. You got to distort it. You got to play with the image, right?
Right. You play with the image. That's the raise part. I don't want it to break, but I just want to add a little bit there to the story. And my book, I write about an event that my first time teaching, I was making them laugh. Everything was going really cool. I got a little over cocky, and the class, my next class I did not prepare well enough for was on a complex topic called bonds payable. And when I say bonds payable to a group of accountants, they get that. Oh dear Lord, I remember that. It's been years ago, but I remember that. And so I write in the book. 95% of it's pretty factual went on. I had a little embellishment just for that tension to keep their attention. And sometimes some stories just don't need to be embellished. And then at the end, and this is the out. When we get out of the story, we don't come to like the end. It's so in my bonds payable story, it was like, so when I get to a point, I go, so let me ask you guys this question. Have you ever done a presentation that you haven't prepared for? Got a little overconfident, came in, and I'm watching people's heads going like a bobblehead. Yeah. What did you learn from that? And now once again, it's about the audience. Now you're flipping it back on the audience and making them think it's your story. But now you're putting it in their lap and getting them to, oh yeah, I've done that. Yeah, I was. So what did you learn? What would you not do again? And when we do this correctly, now that's the V. We've got victory. So and there's a variety of ways, but we always have to find the villain. And I'm. Well, when is this going to air?
This will air probably the 1st of December. I mean, not December. Jeez, January.
1st of January. Well, let's just put it this way. I'm in the process of writing an article about what's the true villain in accounting, and it's going to if me and I have someone helping me write this, if we write it the way I hope we write it, some people are going to get really upset, but that's fine. But a lot of people go, you're right. That is the villain. That is the big villain. And I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. Yeah. But I will say when we do have I'm pretty sure we have a periodical that's going to pick it up. I'll send you guys the link to it.
Yeah, we'll be happy to share.
But there's villains in everything that we do.
Sure.
Something happens. Something, we don't get up and everything goes just like it's supposed to. Write those notes down when something went wrong, or what problem did you solve? Because the problems of villain I provided, or our product, our service was the hero in solving that. That's how we come up with stories.
Well, and you think about the I forget how many, like the 8 or the 12, classic story structures. Man versus man, man versus self, man versus nature. Right. It's all these different variables. The villain can be found in each one of those. Right. And
Right.
it doesn't always have to. It can be your environment in certain circumstances. Right.
Right.
Versus just someone that you can clearly identify as that's my foe.
Right. And if you ever need a place to go to find stories and villains, they've got this city that's perfect for it. It's called Las Vegas. I was doing a half day workshop at a conference there, and I'd been working with this person, this instructional designer, for this association, because I didn't understand their language. They were in the construction world, construction accounting, so I wanted to learn their language. In the morning, we worked probably twice a month for about 4 or 5 months. In the morning of, it was a Sunday morning, I don't know, like June 2nd or something. And she comes down. The class is going to start at 7:30. She comes down about 6:30. I go, "How's your morning going?" She had this look. I was like, "Well, it started out a little weird." And I said, "Would you care to share?" She goes, "Sure." So I get in the elevator. Well, the elevator door opens, and there's a gentleman and somewhat of a towel holding 2 prostitutes' hands. And I went, "Excuse me?" She goes, "No, yeah, no." He was having a hard time keeping that towel up, but he was holding these 2 prostitutes' hands because they stole his wallet. And so I said, "Funny you should say that, because I had breakfast this morning at the hotel, and there was a whole bunch of drunk people in there." And I asked the waiter, I said, "So what's the craziest, funniest thing you've seen around here?" "Oh, it just happened yesterday." I said, "What?" "Well, this guy was chasing this prostitute right in front of her because she stole his wallet." I went, "I see a..." But those stories will come back. There's something in there. I know there's something there that I can apply, but that one will probably be burned into my brain, because that's one of the funniest things somebody has ever told me. But
your next question for the bartender was he carrying a towel?
No, he did say he was dressed. And I'll tell you what I wanted to remark to this woman. I never met her, when we're off air. Yeah, I don't want to put that one on there.
Thank you for that.
No, you're welcome. I don't want the FCC to come down on any of us.
Well, back to your points on creativity. There's a lot to be left to the imagination when it comes to telling stories about Vegas.
Yeah, but there's if we stop and take a look, and the more that, so why that was so successful with the variable interest entities, because I told a story that everybody in that room could relate to, who was married.
Mhm.
Because most don't want their mother-in-law or father-in-law moving in with them permanently.
Mhm.
So the more that we can take everyday life stories and put it into business context, that even becomes even more powerful. We can take business stories that we have, but if we can equate it to something, a story that's happened in our life that a lot of other people, that's the key. That's the secret sauce.
Find the mother-in-law.
Find the mother-in-law. Find the mother-in-law. Exactly.
That's your next book title, huh? Find the mother-in-law.
You know what? That might not be a bad one. Actually, I am getting ready to start to
Hey,
work
if you
on
write
number
that, I'll
3.
write the foreword.
Okay. All right.
So speaking of books, do you have a book that's had a big influence on you, or big impact, or a piece of media or something that you like to gift to people, or anything like that just had a big impact on you?
Oh, the one book that had probably one of the biggest impacts on me was the book by Dan and Chip Heath called Made to Stick.
Oh yeah.
That the curse of knowledge, and the tappers and listeners. I did send.
Yeah.
Did you send the video along on tappers and listeners?
Yep.
That right there, the ability to understand the impact versus the intent versus and the impact differences uh, was a game changer. Was like, I mean, that I referenced it a few times in my book, and I reference it all the time in my presentations. And to watch the audience go, "Oh my God, I'm doing that."
Right.
Recognition is the first piece. If I don't recognize that I'm doing it,
right.
then I'm never doing it. So made to stick. And it was these guys are like PhD at some community college in San Francisco called Stanford University or something like that. So they're really smart guys, but it was never meant to be a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah.
And I guess the story was somebody who was a member of the National Speakers Association picked up what, oh my God, this is the secret sauce. How do we make things sticky? Because we want our audience to remember. And the stickiness is the emotion. How do we bring emotion? Oh, we'll bring them. That's that emotional intelligence stuff. That's that fuzzy stuff that we don't like to talk about.
Well, they also use the metaphors of the elephant and the rider in their book on change management called Switch, which is also, it's probably the best book I've ever read on change management. Same authors, the Heath brothers.
I think it's Switch because I think I have that in my stack of things to read, and I will move that up on that stack because there's another one that they wrote, and my financial planner sent it to me, and I can't remember the name of it. I would turn around, but every time I do that to look at my bookshelf, I can never find it. I'm digging around, but I think everybody in business should read Made to Stick by Dana. You don't have to be a presenter, and the other thing I would highly suggest is everybody. So I have an improv coach. His name is Jay Suko. He's been on faculty at the Second City in Chicago. He's now currently on faculty at the Second City in LA. And I interviewed him on my podcast. He said, you know what? If everybody just took one improv class, this world would be a better place. And I firmly believe that. My son was graduating high school, and I gave him 3 options. I said, if you decide to take a gap year, that's fine. You have 3 options. 1, you can get a 40-hour week job and pay rent. 2, you can save up a bunch of money and go backpack a country that is primarily safe. And we I'm not sure where that is anymore. Or 3, you can go to Chicago and spend a year studying at Second City in their curriculum.
Wow.
And Dad's paying for it. He just finished his first semester at Columbus State Community College. He doesn't realize what he now, to the degree that is what I am giving him a Christmas present this year, but it's not going to be something I'm getting him. There's a number of improv groups here in Columbus, and I'm going to pay for his first class in improv, beginning improv. It's like a 6 or 8 week course, and I want to make him go. Because I mean, someone said, what excites you? What motivates you? Where's your passion? And improv is the cure. I'm a big fan of it. I don't want to like use the word preach, but I talk about it every day on how it just makes the world so much nicer. It deflates a lot of egos, and it's just and those who can improvise. They can be funny too, which we all need to laugh.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I'll just tell you, one leadership characteristic that I frequently cite is great leaders are able to navigate through a lot of gray area. And that's the nature of improvisation right there. Things are rarely black and white. It's very rarely, an on-off kind of scenario. There's a lot of nuance that you have to work your way through. So I love that you touched on that.
Yeah, it's accepting. It's agreeing. It's agreement, but not always agreeing. But when you say no because or yes but, conversations stop. Actually, defenses rise. When you say and, it's like, oh, there's a possibility, and it's so cool when when audiences pick up on that. And I had one gentleman contact me one day, I have an accounting firm. He said, by the way, I just want you to know, we had an issue in one of our meetings, and I pulled out the yes and card. I said, okay, let's look at it from this perspective, and we figured it out. And I went, can I have that in a testimonial?
You're like, yeah, that's what you definitely need, right?
Right, that's right. And it unsticks us when we're stuck. If used properly.
It's really great. So Peter, if people are looking for you, where can they find you?
In my basement office in Westerville, Ohio, but probably
we can publish the address in Google Maps if you'd like. We can't guarantee who's going to show up. But
yeah, no tell. My website is Peter Margaritis, and it's MARGARITIS.com. My podcast is Change Your Mindset. It's out on all the podcast platforms. I am taking a little bit of a sabbatical per se, that I'm scaling back to one episode a month for a few months. I want to change it up. And I decided the collective knowledge outside of my office, outside of my podcast, far exceeds the collective knowledge inside my podcast. And I'm going to take this time asking my audience to help me co-create season 3. And see what I can get out of that. See if I can get some people involved and give me some ideas, because I've been thinking, thinking like about the audience. I've been thinking of what the audience wants. But what if we changed it up and I asked them what they wanted, but over a period of time versus like at one episode then moving on? So they can find me there. And my email is peter@petermargaritas.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It's been one of the most fun episodes, at least for me, that I think we've done, and it's really, I think, enlarged the scope of how we talk about leadership on this program. So,
cool.
Thank you for bringing your insight and your humor and your personality. It lit up the room, so it's been a lot of fun.
I appreciate it, guys, and I'd be remiss if I didn't have to give a big thank you to Roxanne Kaufman-Elliott for introducing us and having this opportunity. So I have to thank her as well.
No problem. For sure. We thank you for being on, and Roxanne's been a good friend of our show, so we appreciate her too.
Roxanne rocks.
All right, thanks, Peter.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Peter.